Hey guys, welcome to this video. Today we'll be talking about if you should go to grad school. Of course, obviously the answer to that it really depends. It depends on the person, it depends on what you want, what you need. So there is no obvious answer whatsoever, as usual, right, in life. So you have to decide it for yourself. But let's try to talk a bit about that, because I feel like I found that the majority of my students don't really know much about the grad school, and they don't really know why someone would decide to go there or someone would decide not to go there. Yeah, so let's try to talk a little bit about that. Of course, it's a topic for a huge amount of videos, but let's try to start. Okay, so what's gonna, in general, just how it works, how the grad school works. When you come to university, when you come to college, right, and when you get a bachelor's degree. So usually what happens is that you study a lot of topics, a lot of different things in a lot of different directions, right? So for example, if you're doing bachelor's in computer science, you still study a lot philosophy, English, music, theater, right? Technically, in reality, whenever you'll be looking for a job, nobody's gonna care like about your knowledge in history, in law. Nobody really cares. You need to know how to write the code well. That's the only thing which is important for them. For the first 2 years, I guess you study like almost everything with tiny focus on computer science. Then within the second half of the bachelor's degree, you focus a lot on computer science, right? So like if that's kind of if that's the origin, right? And like in each direction, let's imagine that would be our focus areas, right? So if this is computer science, in this case, you'll kind of get more focus on computer science, right? So that's what you get that's what you do when you study for bachelor's degree. When you decide to get master's, so what happens? Now let's see what happens when you study for master's degree. Okay, so in that case, you usually do not take any other classes apart from computer science classes. So you only take CS. You take huge amount of classes in all different directions and all different topics, but still specifically in computer science, right? So you kind of like the level of knowledge grows like this, right? And there are usually two types of master's degrees: Masters of Engineering, Master of Science. Usually, there is no difference in between them. The only difference, for example, at UC that I know of is that Master of Science means that you have written a thesis and you defended that thesis, okay, which is considered to be a bit more difficult to do. People who have Masters of Engineering, what they do, they take a comprehensive exam. It's basically like a huge exam, but still, I think, multiple choice. No one really has any issues with it, but still you have to take it. It's kind of like a formality, okay? And I think it's based on like 3 topics, right? So yeah, so that exam is basically 3 classes combined into one exam, and you take a test, multiple choice test on that. It probably depends on university as well, but at least at UC, it just became a formality. There are very few people who fail it ever, so it's not that difficult to do. Okay, so that's ME. Now, what happens when you decide to go for PhD? PhD. In that case, you take even more classes on computer science. They're usually super theoretical. They usually have nothing to do with practice. So if you guys really like hands-on experience, the PhD is definitely not for you. Usually, for example, all the classes I took at the PhD level, and you usually take like computer science 700 level classes, okay? They're usually super far-fetched, they're usually super theoretical. You read a lot of papers, you analyze them, you try to analyze a lot of trends. Technically, you should be writing a paper at the end of each class. In practice, it doesn't happen. For example, when I was taking cybersecurity classes, and I took a lot of them, I thought that I'll be like taught how to hack something. That's kind of that was my expectation. Of course, that didn't happen. We were just analyzing like huge amount of papers, and I remember like at the end of one of the classes, professor said just like, hey guys, like here you have like 20 papers, you just need to study all of them, you need to learn like everything about them, and the final exam will be only about those 20 papers. So don't care about anything else we studied in the semester. I don't care about that, just study the papers. Yeah, so it's very theoretical, and since the purpose, kind of the finale of your PhD studies is writing a dissertation, what happens is that you need to select a topic and you need to dive really deep into that topic, okay? So what happens is that you selecting something and then you go just super deep in there, like insanely deep. you basically become, I don't know, the world expert on that particular thing. What happens actually a lot, very frequently, is that at the end of the day, you may realize that only you and maybe there are some like 2 people in the United States and maybe 1 guy in China actually do the same thing as you. So there are very few people who are actually doing something like that. So PhD will be like this, like a very, very, very thin addition. Right. Yeah, so that'll be PhD. Yeah. So this takes 4 years, right? That takes usually 2 years. That usually takes on top of, so it really depends. If you do it on top of the master's degree, well, okay, so let's say 2 to 5 years. Yeah. Some people, for some people, it takes like 7 years or 10 years to get their PhD. So sometimes it can be very, very tricky. Let's try to think about examples of focus for a PhD student. Okay, so let's try to think about something specific. I just want to provide you an example. Let's say you have a programming language Java. Java has a compiler, Java has a Java virtual machine. And let's say there is some kind of optimization in Java compiler. Let's say by default it optimizes loops to be, no, let's say it converts iteration, no. Let's say it converts recursion into the loops, right? And in this case, what you can be studying as a PhD student is online cyber attacks through Wi-Fi, targeting, a loop unrolling in Java virtual machine, something like this. So it's super, super specific, laser focused. Again, there'll be very few people like in the world who are doing something similar. Possibly you'll be the only one like at all. So let's talk a little bit about why do people go to grad school? Why would you ever decide to do that? What I notice is that a lot of American students go to grad school because they are the best students in the class, right? So that kind of automatically means that the grad school is for them because their peers go there, because their parents went there and they kind of force them to do the same thing. And some students who actually don't have the best grades think that the grad school is not for them because they're not smart enough or something like that. So I think like going to grad school as an option is not described, is not discussed in the class, and that's why a lot of people are just oblivious. They're not really sure like if that is for them. Well, first off, the difference in payments, right? So obviously, if you ever decide to get a master's degree, you'll have to be paid more. So your employer will absolutely have to pay you more than anyone else with a bachelor's degree. And that's kind of the rule. Why and like where it's coming from, we'll talk about in the next video. Right, so I know a lot of people, a lot of my peers who actually decided to go to get a master's degree just because they want to get paid a little bit more. So usually it's like $10,000 or $15,000 a year. That's usually the difference between like bachelor's and master's degree. Is it difficult to transition from a bachelor's degree to master's degree? No, not at all. So the only thing you're doing, especially if you're doing ME, you're just taking more classes and nothing else. But one of the things which you definitely need to know, and very few people like realize that, is that yes, you do have to pay for bachelor's degree. There is almost no way around that. You can get a scholarship probably, I don't know, for 50% of it, right? That's usually the case, I think. But for master's degree, a lot of people get it completely for free. So of course, like I'm originally Russian, and a lot of people who are coming from other countries, they do not have enough money to study in the United States because the economy is like completely different, the currencies are different, right? So let's say to pay $1,500 for one class, it's completely impossible to do that from coming from any other country. Okay, maybe China. Chinese economy is growing, right? So maybe for them it's easier to do. But anyway, so I studied for free. A lot of my peers studied for free. It's not that difficult to get a completely free master's degree. Same thing for PhD. So PhD is financed even better, even more than master's degree. Now, let me give you some kind of recommendations if you should go to grad school. Like why would you do that, and when you would do that? Okay, so my experience is this: if you just want to graduate as soon as possible, if you just want to make money, if you just want to have cash, okay, as quickly as you can, then in this case, I would recommend graduating with bachelor's degree and just finding a job. Okay, at that point, you have the biggest amount of jobs available to you. People don't have to pay you as much as master's degree holders or PhD holders. Okay, so then they don't have to pay you as much. and you immediately start making a lot of money, a lot more than master's degree or like master's degree students or PhD students. When these students graduate, they'll be making more than you, provided that you do not increase, your salary doesn't increase. By default, people with master's degrees, they paid more than bachelors. By default, people with PhDs are paid more than masters. Yeah, so if you want to make cash, if you want to make money as quickly as you can, highly recommend graduating with bachelor's degree. Now, if you want to, now when it comes to PhD, so when would you take that? Probably as a person who's studying for bachelor's degree, you probably took computer science 318 at FMU or 350. So it's basically algorithms or computation theory. If you really enjoyed those classes, if you really enjoy studying for the sake of studying, if you really like learning for the sake of learning without any practical application, in this case, PhD and like that hardcore science would usually fit you really well. The biggest difference between people who have bachelor's degree and PhDs is that these guys are focused mainly on some practical result. So you code, you create a website, like you learn how to create a website, you create a website, and you immediately see the result. People who do science, what they do, they kind of spend, I don't know, maybe like 5% of their work actually becomes something practical. So usually those are the people who just enjoy intellectual process of constant learning without any practical output. And of course, there are a lot more jobs for people who can produce something, for example, a website, right? Because that's what the industry wants, versus people who can create something new, right? And that's something which may be practical like in 5 years or 10 years. Now, when should you get a master's degree, ME or MS? So first off, definitely if you want to study something special, for example, data mining, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, okay? So usually at the bachelor's level, you're really not prepared. There are usually like not enough classes to prepare you well for those types of degrees, which are very like up and rising, which are very hot topics right now, which are very popular, okay? So there are master's degrees in those topics specifically, okay? So if you want to study, for example, cybersecurity, it can be a good option to go and get a master's degree specifically in cybersecurity, or artificial intelligence, or image processing, or big data, for example, okay? Other than that, getting a master's degree just in order to get a raise, okay? So that's usually considered to be not the best idea. So if I were you, honestly, I would either graduate with bachelor's degree and get a job immediately, or I would decide to study something special, then I will apply to master's degree. Or if I decide to study science, right, hardcore science, if I find out that I actually enjoy learning for the sake of learning, right, and if I enjoy without any practical output, in this case, I'll probably go to PhD. That's kind of my recap. That's my vision. In the next video, I'll be talking about something which is very important. Highly recommend watching that. I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.